The island of Taiwan, aka the Republic of China, is not often thought about in the same discussion as organized crime. But to the surprise of many, Taiwan is one of the most gangster-ridden countries in the world. The island has many powerful criminal organizations or gangs. Normalization of gangsterism in the mainstream makes this place a safe haven for mobsters. What makes this nation unique from others is here gangs don't only have power in the streets, they also have influence in the business and political world. It is said that in Taiwan, gangsters don't bribe politicians, they become them. In this video, we will discuss the full history of the development of organized crime in Taiwan and show how this beautiful island came to be a gangster's paradise. The origins of Taiwanese organized crime can be traced back to the triads of mainland China and has had a presence on the island for centuries. The Heaven and Earth Society, aka the Tianduwei, was active in Taiwan dating back to the 1600s under the Qing dynasty. The first Taiwanese Tianduwei branch, known as the Parents Association, was established in 1726. In fact, the first discovery of the secret society by Qing authorities was made in Taiwan. During this time, China was in the process of colonizing the island. According to several historians, the colonization process and new forms of economy produced a frontier culture. They were mostly young males embarking on the dangerous adventure of immigration, followed by very few women, which planted seeds of gangsterism. The authorities had difficulty enforcing the law in Taiwan, and revolts against their rule were frequent. It was during the Lin Shangwen revolt in 1787 that the Qing imperial authorities discovered the Tianduwei. Qing authorities figured out that Lin Shangwen was a member of this secret society. A Taiwanese branch of the Tianduwei formed known as the Society for the Advancement of Younger Brothers. This society and other gangs engaged in organized crime and conspiracy against the Qing government. This was the way of the land until Japan conquered Taiwan from the Qing dynasty in the late 1800s. Several sources say that under Japanese rule, the secret societies mostly disbanded and were replaced by Japanese gangsters known as Langlen, who were imported to keep order on the island. From here on, the lineage was cut off from modern Taiwanese gangs. The island was mostly cleared of Chinese organized crime activity until China regained control of the island after World War II. From this point on is the time period where we can point to the origins of modern Taiwanese organized crime. As we discussed before in our video about the Green Gang, the Republic of China was established in Taiwan by Chiang Kai-shek when he and the KMT fled mainland China after losing the Chinese Civil War to Mao Zedong and the Communists in 1949. The KMT, which is still a major political party in Taiwan, was founded by Sun Yat-sen and had gangster influence since its formation. Sun and his successor Chiang Kai-shek were known to keep many gangster and triad allies to assist them in their goals. Some even said that Chiang Kai-shek himself was a member of the Green Gang in Shanghai. Since most gangsters recognized that communism in China would mean the abolishment of organized crime, they sided with Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists, and many of them took up arms against the Chinese communists, first in the Shanghai Massacre and then in the Civil War. When the Chinese Civil War was over, many of them fled to Taiwan and took their gangster ways with them. However, the KMT didn't only flee to Taiwan. Another KMT group led by General Li Mi escaped southern China to settle in northern Thailand and Burma. With US support, the KMT remained in Burma until 1961, when they were driven into Laos and Thailand. By this time, the KMT had expanded Shan State opium production by almost 1,000%, from less than 40 tons to an estimated 300 to 400 tons by 1962. Up until 1971, these KMT caravans controlled almost a third of the world's total illicit opium supply. Now, it was never proven if the KMT in Taiwan had any connection or made any profits from this opium trade in the Golden Triangle. But given the history of the KMT with narcotics in China, it is extremely possible. Now let's get back to the situation in Taiwan. When the dictator Chiang Kai-shek first established Taiwan as its own nation, the KMT tried to consolidate power on the island and launched a brutal period of right-wing political suppression against the left. Similar to how the communists conducted the Cultural Revolution in mainland China, the KMT nationalists enacted martial law and executed many political elites, intellectuals, and anyone accused of being sympathetic towards communism. Because of the strictness imposed by the government in this time, organized crime at a high level was non-existent, but the government still put gangsters to good use. It is believed that Chiang Kai-shek had many former Green Gang members and Triad members from mainland China placed into high positions of the government. It is believed that through men like Agent Lin Ting Li, gangsters were employed to carry out secret assassinations to communist or democratic sympathizers, but Chiang Kai-shek would eventually purge the KMT of its gangster element. Although the island had no organized crime groups in the early 1950s, there was many gangs on the street known as Jia To, and they were around since the late 40s. The Jia To groups were mostly disorganized and comprised of native Taiwanese boys. They were involved in mostly low-level criminal activity like the extortion of businesses and the protection of gambling houses. However, the new immigrants to Taiwan from mainland China would drastically change the situation. The new Chinese faced discrimination and bullying from the native Taiwanese, who were mostly of Chinese descent themselves. This bullying led to the creation of gangs by new Chinese kids so they can protect themselves against native Taiwanese gangs. These kids who formed the gangs were usually the children of KMT military soldiers or gangsters from mainland China. One of the first gangs to be formed by the new Chinese immigrants was the infamous 4Cs gang, which is today one of Taiwan's most powerful organized crime groups. The 4Cs gang was created by mostly high school students in 1955 and formed around their first leader, Feng Juyu. 2 years later, another gang was formed by young mainlanders called the United Bamboo Gang, which today is the most widely known crime group from Taiwan. The United Bamboo Gang was created by a young man named Chow Lin. From here on, many other mainlander gangs sprang up in cities such as Taipei, Taichung, and Tainan. These Chinese gangs did not have specific turf and were structured and organized in traditional Chinese ways. According to a United Bamboo leader, in the past, we, the offspring of mainlanders, were often harassed by native-born Taiwanese. That's why it was only natural for us to stick together to protect ourselves. These self-help groups later became gangs. Another United Bamboo member was quoted saying, "I became a brother because I grew up in a military commune. Being a kid in that environment means you have a very different experience than kids in urban centers, where you don't even know who lives in the same apartment complex. But in the commune, we kids knew each other very well, and it was common for us to stick around together and drink and fight." In the 1960s, gangs were only involved in petty crimes and mostly involved with street fights with other Chinese and Taiwanese gangs. There weren't many guns in the country yet, so street gangs usually only used fists or bats. The major brawls of the 60s between Chinese and Taiwanese gangs caused the government to launch a major crackdown. The leaders of the 4Cs and United Bamboo were imprisoned, and the other gangs were forced to disband. This leads us to the infamous Chen Chi-li. Chen was born in China in 1943 and immigrated to Taiwan with his parents at age 6. Chen joined the Bamboo Gang in 1958 when he was 14 years old. He was involved in petty crimes and many street fights, but he always wanted more. In 1965, he earned a bachelor's degree in engineering. He then served in the army as a lieutenant, all the while keeping close ties with his gang. During these times, many Bamboo members were joining military and education institutions. Declassified files about Taiwanese organized crime said, starting in 1960, 13 Bamboo Union members entered academies for the Army, Air Force, and Navy. Also, 6 known gang members held jobs at the Ministry of Justice's Investigation Bureau, later becoming the basis of an intimate working relationship between the KMT government and criminal gangs. Chen eventually became the most powerful gangster in the United Bamboo Gang, and by 1967, he was considered the head. Fast forwarding a few years to 1970, Chen Chi-li ordered a member to attack another leader who had betrayed the organization. The man was chased and slashed with a sword in broad daylight in downtown Taipei. The incident shocked Taiwan. As a result, the police launched another attack on the gangs, after which the United Bamboo Gang laid low for the next 10 years. Chen was arrested for the crime and sent to prison for 2.5 years. Then he was sent to Green Island for 3 years, a place where repeat offenders are punished harshly. This would leave the 4Cs gang as the main gang in the country, It was around this time in the 1970s that the Chinese gangs of the country were beginning to transition into organized crime groups. Formerly being only street gangs that were fighting each other, were now slowly starting to make money with rackets such as prostitution, gambling, nightclubs, etc. They also began to structure themselves much more intricately than a regular gang. No one truly knows the inside workings and structure of gangs like the United Bamboo except members themselves, but from what authorities know, they're nothing like other mafias around the world. The structure is very complex, which makes it harder for law enforcement to pin them down. There isn't a strict rank and file like how the Italians structure themselves from soldier to captain to boss. Different crews can be comprised of all kinds of guys from street thugs to mostly legitimate businessmen. There's different branches or tongs that all operate on their own accord, supervised by a central committee or headquarters. The United Bamboo, for instance, has over 60 different branches. For example, some sources claim Chen Chi Li was not the only boss, and there was a somewhat democratic process amongst the hierarchy. An important fact to note is these new organized crime groups are distinct from the triads, although they have similar origins and structures. Taiwan authorities consider Chinese gangs in Taiwan as organized crime groups, but not triads, even though some Western writers use the term triads to describe all Chinese criminal organizations. For most Chinese scholars and law enforcement officials, triads refer only to organized crime groups in Hong Kong. During this period, the famous dictator Chiang Kai-shek passed away in the April of 1975. This was a turning point for the underworld and the nation as a whole. After the death of Chiang, under the new leadership of Yen Cha-kan, the enforcement of martial law slowly relaxed, which would make life easier for gangsters. Upon Chen's release in 1976, he had become involved in legitimate businesses such as selling and manufacturing fire protection equipment, international trade, water and electrical engineering, electronics, stainless steel, heavy equipment, and newspaper and magazine publishing. According to Chen, from 1976 to 1980, he remained a law-abiding businessman and completely disassociated himself from the United Bamboo gang. With the pro-democracy movement gaining momentum in the late 70s, following the Chung Li incident of 1977 and the Kaohsiung incident 2 years later, the KMT government, under the leadership of Chiang Kai-shek's son, Chiang Ching-kuo, started realizing that their authoritarianism was a bad look. They then decided to use the organized crime groups to carry out their deeds so they can wipe their hands clean. They then granted the United Bamboo gang some immunity if they carried out violence against the pro-democracy movement. In the 80s, the gangs grew even more powerful. The economy was booming, and gangsters began to seek new opportunities. Taiwanese gang members targeted businessmen who became more wealthy in these days, and extortion became rampant. More young men became attracted to the lifestyle and joined to expand the gang's membership by the thousands. The booming economy created a booming night and entertainment scene. Thus, gangsters began to create a presence within the mainstream entertainment industry. Examples of this are gangster Young Tung Kwei, who was also a major film producer, and United Bamboo leader Hu Tai-fu, who worked with Jimmy Wang Yu to produce some popular martial arts films. In 1980, Chen Chi Li re-emerged as the leader of the gang because some intelligence agents visited him and asked him to do something for the country. Chen then reorganized the gang and committed himself fully to the cause. This is when we mark the beginning of a phenomenon known as black gold politics in Taiwan. Black gold politics is a term used to refer to the influence of gangsterism within mainstream politics, whether it be politicians collaborating with gangsters or gangsters actually becoming politicians themselves. The phrase comes from the Chinese meaning of the word for black, which also translates to the underworld, and the word for gold, which also means money. This leads us to one of Taiwan's most infamous cases regarding gangsters and black gold politics. It was the 1984 murder of Henry Liu. Henry Liu was a Taiwanese-American writer and journalist who was critical of the KMT and Taiwanese politics. He left Taiwan to become an American citizen in 1974 and would publish many articles criticizing Taiwan's government and Chiang Kai-shek's family. Liu's writings also detailed allegations of repression, human rights violations, and mistreatment of political opponents. According to Chen, he was ordered by high-ranking KMT officials to take out Liu. Chen was told that Liu was a communist and had betrayed the Republic of China as an agent of the CCP. This was proven later to be a lie, to persuade Chen into the hit, since Lu's father himself was killed by communists. Chen arrived in the United States in September of 1984 to carry out the hit. He recruited 2 other United Bamboo members, Wu Tun and Tung Kwei Sun. The 2 hitmen carried out the hit on the morning of October 15, 1984. Lu was found shot to death inside his garage at his home in Daly City, California. Despite working for the government, Chen and his hitman Wu were arrested in Taiwan, along with 300 other members of the United Bamboo Gang, during a November 1984 government crackdown on organized crime, known as Operation Clean Sweep. The other hitman, Tung Kwei Sun, fled the country but was eventually apprehended in Brazil and extradited to New York in 1986. Chen Chi Li and Wu Tun were sentenced to life in prison but would eventually be granted parole in 1991. Chen stated that he felt betrayed by his government since they threw him under the bus after using him to carry out a hit. The assassination became a major political scandal in Taiwan, and USA officials blasted the KMT for allegedly planning a murder on US soil. Operation Clean Sweep resulted in thousands of gang members around the country being imprisoned. However, it also led to the creation of many new gangs, one of them being the infamous Celestial Alliance. The Celestial Alliance was formed by native Taiwanese gang members who were locked up in the Taipei Detention Center. The Celestial Alliance would eventually grow to be one of Taiwan's most powerful and most connected organized crime groups. In 1987, authorities abolished martial law and began to loosen up the country. Then they started releasing many locked up gang members, which created an exponential rise in gang violence and organized crime activity. A year later, Cheng Ching Kuo passed away and was succeeded by Li Tung Hui. Li is credited with transitioning Taiwan to a democracy and liberalizing the institutions. He is commonly known as Mr. Democracy, but he's also known as the Godfather of democracy because his policies invited organized crime like never before. Since the government became democratic, organized crime grew to levels like never before, and the phenomenon of gangsters intervening in politics became totally normalized. As part of the democratization process, elections started to be held locally and eventually nationally, which allowed gangsters to influence politics from the bottom up. This then takes us into the beginning of the glory days for crime, the 1990s. By this time, gangsters became polished businessmen and organized crime penetrated mainstream business. Chen Chi Li was given leniency and released from prison in 1990 after serving 6 years. He then became very rich very fast. He was the first gang leader to get involved in public construction. Because of his connections, he was able to be involved with numerous construction projects. That's when other gang leaders realized that they did not have to rely on the traditional rackets of prostitution, extortion, and gambling to make money. All of a sudden, gangsters became board chairmen and general managers, and all began to get involved in public construction projects. At the time, the Celestial Alliance was also becoming very powerful through businesses such as restaurants, recreations, movie theaters, and construction companies. The 4C's gang was also being refined by its leader, Sai Kun Lun, who created a construction company as a front for his gang, and urged his gang members to start acting like businessmen and not thugs. He led the transformation of the 4C's gang from a gang to a corporation. This was the same time period when guns and drugs began to flow into the country, giving the crime groups another huge lift. A former chief of police in Taiwan was quoted saying, "Before the abolishment of martial law, the crime problem in Taiwan was a minor one. At the time, our main concern was the existence of gambling dens and commercial sex establishments. Even so, these businesses did not really pose a major problem for us. After martial law was lifted in 1986, patrols of the coast became almost non-existent, and as a result, it was easy to smuggle guns and drugs into Taiwan. That completely changed the crime scene here. As a result, homicide rates spiked rapidly in the late 80s, and every gangster began to carry a gun." In 1990, Taiwanese authorities came to the conclusion that another crackdown was needed in order to curb the new rapid expansion of organized crime, so the government launched Operation Thunderbolt, or the Shunlei program, which led to thousands of gangsters being arrested. After Operation Thunderbolt wreaked havoc on the gangs, many gangsters became convinced that the best way to protect themselves from future crackdowns was to transform themselves into elected deputies. The 1990s then marked the beginning of organized crime figures not only influencing politicians, but becoming them. This separates Taiwan from every other nation in the world that has an organized crime issue. Italy, Mexico, Russia, etc. all have mafia-influenced politicians, but it's almost unheard of for a known gangster to become an elected official. The political situation of the 90s was mayhem. Previously, gangsters would typically be involved in crimes and violence with other gangsters, but now with politics involved and political rivalries being similar to gang rivalries, stories of Taiwanese politicians getting caught up with crime or being extorted, attacked, and even killed became commonplace. One of the first major incidences regarding this new wave of black gold politics was the murder of Chung Yuen-feng in 1994. Chung was murdered by a politician who was Speaker of a county council named Chung Tai-chi. Chung Tai-chi and his crew showed up to Chung's house and shot him dead over a business dispute. Prior to the shooting, Chung Tai-chi was even acknowledged by the president for being a valuable KMT member. This takes us to the man who is one of the main figures in black gold politics, Lo Fu-chu. Lo Fu-chu is the founder and leader of the Celestial Alliance. Lo was a native Taiwanese gangster who was a target of Operation Clean Sweep. While incarcerated in the 80s with other Taiwanese bosses such as Wu Tsung-tang and Xiao Jae-hong, they formed the Celestial Alliance with Lo at the top. These men knew they couldn't compete with the large numbers and violent ways of the Chinese gangs, so they vowed to become the most economically dominant and politically connected. They began to penetrate all kinds of businesses like nightclubs, massage parlors, futures trading, entertainment, and newspapers. With this, Lo has become one of the wealthiest men in all of Taiwan, but his power doesn't stop in the economic realm. He also legitimized himself by penetrating mainstream politics. Lo fled the country in the early 90s to escape Operation Thunderbolt, but he had his two sons run for office on his behalf. One son, Lo Ming-tai, is a KMT representative and was elected to the Legislative Yuan. The other son was elected to a municipal assembly. Lo returned to Taiwan as a more polished gangster and a well-established businessman. He got involved with construction, real estate industries, and allegedly in illegal gambling, but he didn't stop there. Since Taiwan has a law that says sitting legislators are immune from imprisonment, Lo Fu-chu ran for a seat in Taiwan's Legislative Assembly and won in 1995. Lo formed a group of independent legislators, which is significant because they had the ability to swing votes due to Taiwan's voting bloc being split evenly among the two main parties, the KMT and DPP. Despite Lo having a lot of power in the business and political world, he never forgot his gangster roots. Numerous occasions of Lo flexing his street muscle occurred, like in 1996 when a politician named Liao Sui-kung was physically assaulted. Apparently, Liao publicly accused Lo of being a gangster to discredit him, which led to Liao being abducted, blindfolded, stripped naked, and locked inside a dog cage that was left on the side of the road next to a banner that read, "Doing Justice for Heaven." Lo has also been known to assault politicians while in the legislative building, and once even swung a pipe at an opponent. He was also known for slapping a female political rival on live TV. Lo stayed influential in politics and the underworld until his arrest and imprisonment in 2013 for stock manipulation and money laundering. Although gangsterism was being more tied into high business and politics, the ruggedness back on the streets was still growing as well. Many gang murders were taking place, including the slaying of powerful gang bosses. One famous murder around this time was the 1996 slaying of Chen Young-ho. Chen Young-ho, aka Da Bao, was a beloved 4C's leader who was gunned down and killed with another 4C's leader by a rival Taipei-based Pine Union gang. The murder shocked law enforcement and the underworld and almost led to one of the bloodiest gang wars in the country. Chen's funeral was one of the largest funerals in the nation's history, with leaders of all gangs and several politicians in attendance. By the late 90s, a large part of the country became aware of the underworld and its influence on politics. Many were outraged and losing faith in their government. At this time, it was believed that about half of all elected officials and deputies were either gangsters themselves or affiliated with organized crime. The organized crime situation carried over into the 2000s as well. In this era, gangsters had to become more tech-savvy to stay afloat and had to utilize opportunities spawned by the advancement of new technologies like cell phones and other electronics. Another big change in this decade was the passing of gangster Chen Chi-li in 2007. Chen's funeral was attended by thousands of gangsters and politicians all around Asia. By this time, there was around 1,200 crime groups or gangs in Taiwan, with most being small street gangs and only 12% being organized crime groups. The United Bamboo Gang was the largest gang in the nation, with the Four Seas Gang close behind and the Celestial Alliance coming in third. There are no consistent statistics on the membership strength of these gangs, but it is believed that the United Bamboo Gang has around 20,000 core members with up to 10,000 associates and 70 branches. The Four Seas Gang has around 10,000 members with 36 branches, and the Celestial Alliance has around 5,000 members with many more associates and over 30 branches. These gangs also created footholds in many countries around the world, including the USA, Canada, Britain, Australia, and other European nations. By this time, northern Taiwan was controlled by organized crime groups, and southern Taiwan was dominated by the Jiatou groups, with most organized crime activity centered in Taipei. By 2008, the United Bamboo Gang was considered one of the most dangerous gangs in the world by American federal authorities. The organized crime and political connection increased in the 2000s as well. Many incidences of corruption and violence within the political world continued, and the public became more and more aware. Some examples of this time period are the slaying of 2 Celestial Alliance members in KMT lawmaker Lo Ming-sai's office. Also, KMT lawmaker Sean Lien was shot in the face by an organized crime member. The president at the time, Chen Shui-bian, became a vocal opponent of organized crime and tried clamping down on their activity. But even he was accused of corruption. He was convicted of money laundering and bribery and forced to step down in 2008. This brings us to another man who represents black gold politics to the core. He is United Bamboo leader / politician named Chang Anlo. Chang Anlo, aka White Wolf, was born in China in 1948 and relocated with his family to Taiwan a year later. In high school, he joined the United Bamboo Gang and was a known fighter on the streets. He did prison time for attempted murder after stabbing a rival sometime in the 60s. Chang is known as the brains behind the United Bamboo Gang and is credited with giving the organization its current hierarchy structure. He was the most powerful person in the organization besides its mega boss, Chen Chi-li. In the 80s, he opened a restaurant in Los Angeles, which is probably just a base for United Bamboo activity in the States. Chang was also involved in the murder of Henry Liu in 1984. In the December of 1986, he was sentenced to 15 years in an American prison for drug trafficking. While locked up, he became close with many powerful Italian mafia members. He was released after 10 years and returned to Taiwan. However, he had to flee the country in 1996 to escape authorities, and he settled in China. While in China, he created a political party called the Chinese Unification Promotion Party in 2004. He then started a Taiwanese branch of the party in 2005. The party's main goal is to promote the joining of China and Taiwan as one nation, while still preserving each other's political systems. The party also promotes peace and avoiding war at all costs. However, authorities say the party is just a front for organized crime activity, while others accuse Chang of being a CCP sympathizer. In 2009, Chang Anlo admitted to instigating protests against the Dalai Lama's visit to Taiwan with the aid of United Bamboo gangsters. The reason is unknown, but it is believed that Chang was defending the CCP since the Dalai Lama is viewed as a separatist in mainland China. Chang returned to Taiwan in 2013 and was immediately arrested, but released quickly on bail. Authorities allege that illegal firearms had been trafficked through his political party. In 2013, there was 20,000 members of the party with 75 different branches. Chang Anlo still remains powerful in the underworld and politics to this day. From the 2010s on to the current day, Taiwanese gangs are still just as powerful as they were and can be compared to the Italian mafias and Mexican cartels in terms of influence. They are still involved in the traditional rackets and are still a major force within Taiwan's political system, but have also expanded into new things such as human trafficking and cryptocurrency. Apparently, the Four Seas Gang established a base in mainland China and has lost some of its influence back home, while the United Bamboo Gang is even stronger in Taiwan. The Four Seas Gang also further legitimized itself by establishing a legitimate organization as a front called the Four Seas Concentric Association, which throws public events and balls for high society businessmen and KMT politicians. The United Bamboo Gang has been in the news in recent times for incidences involving drugs, human trafficking, kidnapping, etc. For example, 180 suspects of the United Bamboo Gang were arrested in the Philippines in August of 2012 and deported to Taiwan for allegedly trying to set up a base for a scam operation. Not long after, the president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, who prides himself on being an anti-drug crusader, has come out to say that the 14K triad and the United Bamboo Gang are the main culprits behind the drug problem in his country. Another big case of the 2010s was the 2015 kidnapping of Hong Kong billionaire and oil tycoon Wang Yuquan. The 68-year-old chairman of the Pearl Oriental Oil Company was abducted on September 20, 2015 by two gang members and was locked in a house in western Taiwan for 38 days. Wang was blindfolded and cuffed to a bed the entire time, while the kidnappers made demands to his family. During his captivity, he was also beaten and burned with cigarettes, which left him visibly bruised. Wang's wife eventually paid the kidnappers $1.6 million in American dollars of Bitcoin for his release. The suspects were arrested and named as members of the United Bamboo Gang. In the current day, Taiwanese gangsters are still heavily involved in all criminal activities and still enjoy some degree of impunity from the law. They're a major force in the drug trade around the world, from being closely tied with the Asian Samgor crime syndicate, whose leader was arrested in 2022. They're also heavily involved in new forms of scams, extortion, blackmail, and human trafficking. Just in late 2022, the Taiwanese government stated that the main three gangs are responsible for all the human trafficking in the country. The United Bamboo, Four Seas, and Celestial Alliance are still the three main crime groups in Taiwan. The United Bamboo is currently led by Huang Xiaosen, who has been in charge since the death of Chen Qi-li. The Four Seas Gang is led by Zhang Kun-wei, who had the position since 2021, and the Celestial Alliance is led by Zheng Yingfu, who's been in power since 2019. Other smaller organized crime groups are still active, like the Pine Union and Big Lake Gang. Also, native Taiwanese Jiatou groups, like the Manga Group, are still active. These groups, along with other less organized gangsters, are believed to contribute to a total of over 100,000 gangsters on the island. However, the gangsters today are not viewed as patriotic as they used to be. Many now believe that the gangs are under complete control of the CCP and can be used as an instrument to overthrow Taiwan's government in the midst of tensions between the two nations. So now the government is faced with a double-headed dilemma. Not only do gangsters pose a societal threat for their criminal acts, now they also pose a national security threat for their ties with a rival nation. As tensions rise with China and disastrous outcomes looking possible, one can only hope that the situation is handled in a competent manner. How the Taiwanese government handles the situation domestically and abroad is yet to be determined, but there's some evidence of more crackdowns to come. With all the question marks in the region, one thing is for sure: with the current strength of the underworld, organized crime in Taiwan is going nowhere anytime soon. Thank you for watching this video. Hit the like and subscribe button, and stay tuned for who we cover next.